and welcome to Y2K Group Chat. This is a series about how artists navigate through their practice and a behind-the-scenes look into their lives. Y2K Group is an art agency and advisory focused on supporting emerging artists in New York and beyond. Marcela Flórido is a Brazilian-born emerging artist. She lives and works in Brooklyn, New York. She received an MFA from the Yale University School of Art in painting in 2015 and a BFA from the Slade School of Fine Art, London, in 2013. Recent exhibitions include a group show called Body in Motion, Stems Gallery, Brussels, Marcela Flórido, Gustavo Prado, Y2K Group, New York, Mushrooms, Y2K Group Offsite, New York. Costella de Aden, Monstera Deliciosa, with Florencia Escudero. Kristen Lorello Gallery, New York. Lacos. Anita Schwartz, Galleria de Arte, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Snow Day, Terry Goldberg, New York. Slip, Sarah Fox, Marcela Florido, Shabalala Self, Stems Gallery. Marcela will have an upcoming solo exhibition at Ross and Kramer Gallery, New York, and she will be featured in a group show called Building Narratives at Monte 8, Latina, Italy, followed by a show with Carl Costiel, Milan, Italy, in 2021. The following was recorded in June 2020. Enjoy.
Hello.
Hi. Hi,
Hi.
Marcela. How are you?
I'm good, Bernadette. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to call and spending
Of course.
an hour with us or however long.
How's it going?
That is nice. Oh, it's going good. It's going crazy.
Oh yeah, crazy? Anything in particular or like the world?
I think the world.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. I mean, I think we're very close, right? You guys are just a few blocks from me.
Yeah. It's good to know that you're still going to the studio during this obviously crazy time.
Yeah. I mean, I started recently. I think because you guys been here, there's a lot of people here, but everybody's been really committed to try to make it super safe. So I bike here, so I feel comfortable coming. But it's a recent thing. It's a recent development in
really?
quarantine life. Yeah.
So how long did it take you to feel comfortable to actually go back to your studio?
I came for the first time in the middle of May.
Okay.
So it's been a month.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Oh, nice.
And prior to that, were you working from home or did you set up a space in your apartment?
Yeah, I was. Sorry, are we doing this or?
Oh, are we doing? Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, it's recording.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just like went for it.
No, that's great. I'm like, are we chit-chatting? Should I say something?
Well, like the last couple of times we did this, I was so shy, but I feel so comfortable with you. So I'm just going to chat.
I'm going to say the same thing. Me too. I think the only reason why I'm doing this is you guys, because I also feel like I haven't been seeing people. So I kind of feel that my social skills are just disappearing.
Oh, I do too, actually.
It's so weird, right?
It is really weird. It's weird not being able to like interact with friends or like just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I've definitely been overly cautious with everything. And I actually don't really leave my apartment. It's kind of sad to say.
That is really good. No. I think there's so much uncertainty right now. In the beginning, coming to the studio felt very stressful. Like the first 2 days I biked here and any interaction felt very scary. And by the time that I got home, I was just so exhausted because it's been like over 2 months that I had like taken a bike and like seeing people. I just felt a bit overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But then like, gradually I've been so lucky because my studio mates, everybody just chipped in and we got a ton of hand sanitizer, paper towels, alcohol wipes. And so there's in every strategic place, like by the sink, by the door, by the fridge, there's a little station with that you can really like sanitize your hands and
That's
stuff.
great.
So yeah, so that was really like, okay, I have some control. And then, keeping up and saying that the numbers were like going really down in New York. And so I started getting a little bit more confident coming here.
That's great. I think that's great that when, as a collective, that you guys came together and pitched in. And I really think that your studio and the building that you're in is so it's really great. It's really amazing. And even though I've only been there a couple of times, you could definitely feel the sense of community.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you said that. It's a super special group of people. I think in this time, there's been so much questions like, how relevant is art right now? And I can't say that, but I can say that artists, like as a community, have been fucking relevant, have been so amazing, and just really showing up for each other, because a lot of us got like our hours cut, or like our unemployment, have not been able to meet the studio fees. And as a group, it's been super real. And as a group, people are really showing up for each other. So
amazing.
I feel so lucky.
That's so great. Yeah, I just obviously times are so hard right now for many people and especially artists. And living in New York in general is just really it's a job within itself, and
it is. It fucking is.
yeah, totally. And that's really great to hear that everyone's kind of just like supporting each other. It's good to hear that and know that.
I think that sometimes I question like, why am I in the city? It's so expensive. It's such a hustle all the time. But in moments like this, where like the community just really shows up for each other, and I think there is this idealistic aspect of being in New York, which is a city with so much history of welcoming different people, being accepting of our differences, and there's kind of an idealism that it felt very palpable in this super scary past few months,
Yeah, definitely. So since you are going to the studio, what have you been working on, if you don't mind me asking?
No. So I had a bunch of shows that were canceled like immediately. It was a bit scary in the beginning, but some of these shows just got postponed. So I have a show at Carl Costiel in Milan that was supposed to be this summer, and we postponed it to next May. So it's good that it hasn't canceled, but it shifted the plan. So I just opened a group show in Brussels this month at Stam's Gallery. So that was nice. Because Europe, Brussels open already, so I'm sure there are some limitations of visitors, but it was nice to have a deadline.
That's awesome.
And so that really pushed me. And now I'm gonna have a show with Ross Kramer Gallery in New York in August.
Amazing.
So
That's great.
I know. I'm like working very soon.
Do you like having a deadline? Is that something that you prefer?
Yes and no. I think that it depends. Right now, it felt really good to have some motivation to come to the studio and to just push myself a little bit more. But I think usually in normal times, it has felt like I was producing work, rather than creating. Like sometimes when you have so much commitments, it feels like there's very little margin for error and for like allowing the paintings to just be a fuck up and learn from the mistakes. Sometimes I feel like, oh no, I need to have that many paintings by this time.
Oh, wow.
And that sometimes that like makes me just be more conservative, like be less bold or not try new things. And that has definitely felt frustrating.
Yeah. Do you prefer to just like have more, like to be able to just like experiment a little bit more, or?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the reasons why I've always kept a part-time job. I never wanted to depend financially on the paintings because I just want to paint whatever I want to paint and not take into consideration if people will like them or will want to live with them or will want to support them. Like, I think that the paintings need to be, whatever they need to be. And I'm sure that there's years that they just look completely crazy and uncohesive. And then there will be times when sometimes a body of work will feel more, people can relate to more. But I don't want to depend on that. So that like I think I will always have my part-time job. I will always have like my little income on the side so that the paintings could just be free to be as ugly as they need to be.
Well, I don't think they're ugly at all.
Thank you.
And that's very New York thing, though, to just have like your job and then your part-time job, or be a consultant and do something else.
Yeah.
So that's very New York spirit.
New York spirit. We're definitely hustlers. Yeah. I love it.
Definitely. So you're making work currently. Is there anything specific that is developing because of what is going on in the world and like COVID?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. So the show that we had together last September, I felt like it really marked the beginning of this body of work that I've been working since, which are like these variations of that figure. And I've been working on that since our show, but came quarantine, everything changed. So I was at home, completely like my hours got severely cut at work. I didn't know what was going to happen. So, and just mourning for everything. It felt so overwhelming. So I started making just very small drawings, and the imagery that started coming out was very different than the imagery in the paintings. And still having the figure and still having to deal with like some kind of self-portrait or self-reflection, but a different set of symbols that started coming up. And I don't feel that the imagery that started coming up in the drawings has yet migrated to the paintings, or I don't think it would be a matter of like translating the drawings into paintings. I haven't found an organic way to I mean, I don't know what these drawings will become, or if they are what they are, those drawings, but they were definitely unexpected, and I want to include them in the show for sure.
Amazing.
So I made a lot of drawings, and I don't know how we will integrate them with the paintings, but they will be part of it somehow. And I think that they will complement the conversation. They will show a different side or a different aspect of the figures in the paintings, but they feel like a shift.
Interesting. What kind of materials are you using to create those drawings?
Super basic. I'd like paper and like graphite, and then my partner had like, he works in an office, so he had a bunch of those like office pans. I don't know, even like just regular pans. Yeah, and I'm like, oh sure, I don't have anything right now, I can use them. And like markers, like highlighters, shit like that, like office material.
That's so cool, because I'm assuming most of your materials are at your studio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and the paintings are so technical. I love like having all my oils and my little mediums and my range of brushes. I love the technical aspect of oil painting, and there's no way that I could have that set up in the apartment.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't even feel capable of painting a couple months ago. It just
Really?
felt, yeah, I was not being able to focus for like 10 minutes, let alone like try to make a painting.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So the drawings felt very meditative and like a very practical way to try to calm the mind and focus the attention without feeling too overwhelmed. Like, oh, this requires a lot of my attention and I don't have it right now. So it was a really
Cathartic.
useful. Yeah, it was really cathartic. That's a very good.
I
And
love.
I think like,
Oh, go sorry. Go ahead.
sorry to interrupt.
No, I was just gonna say I love the fact that like you're creating these drawings and I most of the work that I've seen from you has been large scale paintings, and so it's really cool to hear that you're creating these pieces that are smaller and yet they complement your existing body of work.
Yeah, and scale is a total thing because since I came back from the studio, like I had all these stretched, like super large scale canvases that I don't feel inclined to paint right now. And I don't know, like the large scale paintings are so bodily for me. They're so much about like the gesture of the size of my body and the physical aspect of like, there's so much about strength, and I feel so fragile right now that tackling these big canvases just feel like something that my body's not ready to do right now.
Wow.
Yeah, so they are very small. Like when you come to the studio, you're gonna see that there's been definitely a shift in scale.
Wow. The way you described it though about like your body not being able to handle it, it's almost like, I just think about the process of painting and like it's really kind of like, bringing to life something, kind of like giving birth to something. And I just found that so interesting how you worded that.
Yeah, I mean, it requires so much energy. Like first, just to cover that amount of surface and move the painting around the studio, but also they are bigger than me. They're larger than me, and like metaphorically, but also like just literally right now is too much.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's, I mean, you can't even argue with that. It's like you just gotta accept it, right? Like the body's just not ready for it.
Yeah. Oh wow. I'm also, I think it's so fascinating how, obviously you're a painter now, but I was looking at your CV and there's something that I didn't know about you. And you actually are a professional trained classical dancer. You studied ballet and find that so interesting. So how did that develop from like, you being like I don't want to say, is ballerina the technical term? I don't know. I don't know. So, okay, being a ballerina to, discovering that, you wanted to be an artist. I mean, ballet is obviously a form of artistry. So, but how did that develop?
It was more like I never intended to be a ballerina. In Brazil, we don't have the support for sports like American schools have. So I didn't even have any sorts of sports in my school. So my mom wanted me and my sisters to practice something. And there was this ballet school that was really good where we lived. And, the New York City Ballet started sponsoring the school midway through. And they selected students to do this professional course, which was like a super long, I think it was like 6 or 7 years with dance history. It was a real like professional. And I got pulled into this course, and my sisters got selected as well. So I was young. There wasn't a lot of decision and like, oh yeah, I want to be a ballerina. But it was, it was what my sisters were doing. It just felt like, so it was only when I was like a teenager and clearly people in the course were like really like being groomed to become ballerinas. I knew that wasn't like, I never thought like that I wanted to take it seriously, but I was so far already into it. I had invested so many years that I just decided to graduate and get my degree. And as sad as it sounds, after my graduation, I never danced again.
When you were in school to become a ballerina, were you hoping to eventually be a painter, be a different type of artist, or was it later on? Okay, cool.
I mean, I never had the goal of becoming a ballerina. It was more, it was this thing that I was doing for, I don't know, my sisters were doing, and it didn't feel like there was, a lot of intention from my part. I think I was good. I got selected, and it was a really good opportunity, but there was never in my mind the desire to be a ballerina and always the desire to be a painter. So it was, I had invested so many years in the dancing because of whatever family that I was like, okay, sure, I might as well just dedicate a couple more years and get this degree that is just like this achievement. Is more like a record of something that I did in years, but I knew that it was not something, I wasn't even good, like the girls that I was dancing with, they were amazing. And it was just very clear to me and to the others that it was not my path. Yeah, but I mean, I don't regret it. And it definitely, this like body awareness and ideas of, because, classical dancing is so old school with its ideas of femininity and beauty. I think all these kind of uptight, conservative models and ideas come up in the paintings. They definitely like show up.
Amazing. Do you think is it in like the figures that you paint, or is it in what ways do you think it shows up?
In the beginning, I think that like this whole scale thing and being and pushing the limits of my physical body, even in terms of like how big can I paint? How much can I push this in terms of like my physical capacity? And now I think the paintings really deal with ideas of a quiet and contemplative beauty. And I think that comes from, there is a classical aspect to it that a lot of people say that the paintings are conservative, or they don't question why the figures are not like more outwardly sexual. And I think that the quietness and the contemplative aspect of them relates to something that was present in the classical years of my dancing.
Wow. That's so cool. That's so cool. Just like, because obviously I've been to your studio before and I didn't know that. So hearing that now, I'm just like, wow, like I definitely do see that. And that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of people don't know about me. And I decided to start being a little bit more clear and open about this, like, big part of my life as a ballerina very recently, because I was like, okay, I can totally see how could it not have informed, right? How could it not be so? But a lot of people don't know about it. It's cool that you know.
Well, I mean, I looked at your CV, so
Yeah.
No, but yeah, I think everything you said, that was just like it's so interesting. like me as a little girl, I definitely wanted to take the ballet classes and I never did. But
Aw.
but just seeing how like it's a huge part of your youth. I mean, you're still young, but we're all still young. But you know, your younger age and how it's still in you, like and it shows in the work.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah.
Nice.
I haven't danced before again. Like since it was something also that once I got this degree, it felt like, okay, now I'm free to, because it was so time consuming. And for a long time, it was my main community.
Yeah.
And once I could put kind of like, okay, this chapter of my life is closed and I can move on. It also felt like a big freedom. And, being like, it's been what, over 10 years now,
Wow.
like probably like 12 years. And to be able to finally reconcile and feel that it's almost like coming full circle when the dancing is part of the painting. It's really nice. It feels like, that these experiences that you go through somehow they show up in the paintings. The paintings definitely don't lie.
Yeah, yeah. So were you always like drawing or sketching, or like when did that start to, develop and you realized that you wanted to pursue, painting or being an artist?
I think I was always drawing. Like it's definitely one of those kids that always have a pencil. It's like always being creative. But then again, like schools in Rio, and especially at that time, are very different than schools in America. We do not study art. There's no incentive. Like I never studied art in school. And my parents, they were great, but they were their priorities were like, you need to learn English and you should do a sport. So that's how dancing came into. So art, I only started like studying art once I left Brazil, which is when I was 18. So I didn't even know what the professional life of an artist is. So some aspects of being a painter and like having a studio-based practice, like all these hours that you spend alone, some of these things that might come as a given for many people, they felt like all I knew was that I liked to draw, I didn't know that I was signing up for this like super insane existence.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I feel that like when I teach or when I talk to like people who have the ambition of being an artist, like encouraging them, but also being very honest about. And there are many ways of being an artist. Obviously, being a studio-based painter is just one way of being an artist. And people who are much more invested in social practices or are artist collectives have a very different approach. But the life of an artist that has a studio and a studio practice and the routine and ritual of spending so many hours alone is very specific and kind of unique and requires a whole set of tools that I feel like I'm only being able to feel comfortable with recently.
Interesting. What's your ritual?
I do a lot of cleanup when I come to the studio. So clean my brushes, like sweep a little bit, reorganize, like listen to some podcasts while I am just like having that kind of peripheral view, looking at the paintings, but not looking at the paintings. Yeah. And like, as the day starts coming, I think the energy at night it's for me the creative energy, when like I put my music on and when I feel like, okay, the paintings are mixed, the brushes are clean. I've been looking at these paintings for a few hours now, and I know what I want to do with them. So that's when, like, the later the day gets, like, that's when things start, like, shaking in the studio.
That's so interesting. So you like surround yourself with the work and just like passively work on other things until that moment strikes, or
Yeah. Sometimes I have, like, okay, like, for instance, now today I have this very boring task. I want to glaze this little painting. I want to, like, it's very technical. And this is what I will do now. Like, anything that requires, like, real creative and decision making, that will be later. That will be, like, when, the sun starts coming down and I can feel the vibes. Yeah. So now it's all, like, more task-based and technical kind of stuff.
So do you go like in the afternoon and then unwind a little bit, or is there like a specific time? Like, do you go in like at 4 and then it strikes at 6? Like, how does that kind of, or is every day a little different?
In quarantine days, I like to spend the morning with my partner. I like to have coffee with him and we talk. Like, we just cooked brunch for ourselves this morning. Like, it's such a unique thing that in New York I can have time. That I know that once things start opening up again and, like, shows start coming back, I will have less and less time for these basic daily beautiful things, like having coffee on the stoop
Small
and
pleasures.
kind of small pleasures. Like, yeah, totally. So I've been dedicating my mornings for these things. Like, we went for a nice walk this morning, and we try to have a calm morning before we do our thing. So I usually have been arriving at the studio around 1 p.m. and I won't really start painting until probably 3 or 4.
That sounds so nice and relaxing.
Yeah, I mean, studio has been, like, a very amazing way to keep me grounded.
That's so good.
But during normal times in New York, it's crazy. I go to my job, and then I, like, commute an hour to come to the studio. Sometimes there's studio visits. It's definitely not so calm.
I can only imagine. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it has been, strangely nice to be able to do, or to be able to focus on, like, yourself. And at least I think so for, like, myself as well, just being able to, like, not having to go to an office. But I'm very fortunate that I do get to work from home, and I know a lot of people don't have that, have that opportunity. Yeah. So it's really, it's so strange, but I mean,
there's definitely silver linings. I think that, I was talking to some friends about that. Like, I feel that most of us, and most of my friends, we have mourned and suffered, and we're continue to do so, and got scared and got let go from our jobs. Like, there's been all of this real struggle, but being able to look at the silver linings that this time has, like, provided. Like, a lot of friends who are parents have been able to spend a lot of time with their kids and bonded with their kids. And I think for me, I haven't cooked my own food in years. I'm always like grabbing a little bite on the go, having, like, when I'm working in the studio till super late, just, like, ordering food, delivery, and being able to cook my own food for every meal has been, like, a real source of pleasure for me.
Wow. Yeah.
In these past couple months. So yeah, I think it's okay for us to say that, some of these shifts have been necessary, to acknowledge that at least I feel, and I think that some of my friends feel that way, that we've been so overloaded and living a life that is just so overly stimulated with exhibitions opening, bills to pay, constantly on the move, and so many important, like, slow things, like just having a coffee in the morning, were being, erased from our lives.
Absolutely.
So, right?
Absolutely. I feel the same way. There's those little things that kind of just like make your morning or make your evening. Matthew and I both also live in New York, obviously. And so just, yeah, constantly like getting up at 6, going to work, or getting ready to go to work,
Commuting.
and then commuting, and then
Yeah.
having to meet and go to like to a studio visit, or trying to like make some time to go to the gym, or it's exhausting. Yeah, definitely.
100%. I mean, you guys are like, you work so hard. You have the exhibitions, your spaces. You've been doing so much. Like, yeah, it's crazy. And I've been trying to bring that attitude to the studio as well. And to, like, that thing that we were talking about, the production, that sometimes I feel like I'm producing work rather than being in the studio creating. I think that has been good because I just don't feel compelled to work in some of the works that I was working before. Like, I feel that those paintings, they are part of a body of work that is shifting. And there's just too much uncertainty for me to even try to predict or control what these new works are going to look like. So I might as well just not try to do that and just be in the studio and let them be. Like, paint what I want to paint, allow the work to be strange, allow the work to be slow, allow the work to be clumsy, and somehow it feels like I'm finally being able to have that space to allow things to be weird,
It's so funny because you say the word weird, but I just, when I look at your work, I don't think weird. I think very, like, I don't know, just beauty and femininity and strength, and I find them to be powerful and just like a celebration of the figures themselves. I was curious.
Thank you.
Of course,
Thank you.
of course.
That's very meaningful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing your work. I was curious to know about the figures themselves. Are they anyone in particular? Are they kind of like a self-reflection, or like, are they other individuals in your life?
So it's funny because you were asking about me as a child, and it's so funny. All the drawings, or the vast majorities of all the drawings from like childhood to teenager, they were always female figures. And I'm like, I don't think I have to go super Freudian to like, I grew up in a house of women. Like, there's so many women in my family, and my dad is the only man. So we're all very tight, very strong. There's that Latin American big family together attitude. So I'm sure that has, my reference were always women. But I think that now that I'm definitely way more self-reflective and self-critical, and I try to understand and I try to be specific with what I'm trying to communicate with the figures, I think that they are this mix, this combination of myself, but other women in my life, like friends and sisters and mother. And because I rarely sketch the paintings before, I usually paint directly on the canvas. There is this also act of discovering the personality of each figure, the quality of their gaze, the quality of their posture, what is that the painting itself kind of like naturally arrives at that place. And I kind of it's almost like I'm just enabling for them to be what they already want to be. So if I'm trying to force the painting to look a little bit more stern or have a little bit more attitude, but what I'm saying is that the figure is actually very soft and has a softness to it or a kindness to it, then I just feel that my job is to allow the softness to come forth and accept what the painting wants to be. But I think, I like decisions like the color of the skin or the pleasure that I take and painting their skin or their hair, this kind of sensuality, but also specificity is very important to me. And I think it has to deal with like understanding, because obviously growing up in Brazil, nobody approached me as like, oh, here's this Latina or this Brazilian woman. I was just a woman.
Yeah.
But here, since I moved to America, there's identity politics and labels and expectations, and trying to understand how I see myself or how I see these figures inhabiting a conversation that is so much about the color of the skin, so much about the expectations that one projects on another based on their looks. And I think it's a very interesting exercise to give justice to these figures and be specific about their features and about the way that they exist, I definitely don't want to be careless, and I don't want to be general about them. I want them to be who they are in each painting.
That's so interesting. I love how you're explaining that the paintings kind of dictate the individuality of these figures, and one can argue that well, you're in control of the brush, don't like you control it, but really I kind of think it's like very innate, something larger or bigger, like your inner, I guess I'm getting a little spiritual here, but like your inner.
we like our spiritual podcast.
Yeah.
We share that.
Definitely. But just very, I guess just innate. Like it develops, it happens.
Yeah, I think I struggle sometimes when a lot of people ask me what the paintings are about, as if I come to the studio with a very specific idea and then I just enact my thoughts. And it really isn't like that. Like there has to be a lot of room for like unconscious drives and emotions that haven't really been processed, and mistakes, and the technical difficulties of painting with oil paint, and all of this room that it is the unknown. I think that really is like, that is what's at the forefront when I come to the studio. So I need to be surprised by the paintings as much as I want them to be something and to have agency. I also need to look at them and respond to them and like accept how they are behaving. And if I'm not excited, if I'm not surprised, if I'm not challenged, then like, what the fuck am I doing here?
Yeah. Wow.
So it has to be this discovery, right? It doesn't have to be, but I hope that it is a discovery. I hope that it is challenging and mysterious for a long time, because it's what keeps me coming back. There's like all this mysterious and unconscious emotions, parts of myself, thoughts, ideas, movements that only that I can only allow to come to the surface in the studio, and they thrive in the studio. So I think that's part of it.
Do you feel like when you're in the studio, you're like you're more vulnerable, or like how is that something that you think you can relate to? Or
it's such a private space, right? Yeah. I've been considering sharing my studio because I just want to like save some money so I can buy some like more materials and things. And I've been thinking, and I suffered. I was like, oh no, sharing the studio, what the fuck? But I think it's both. I think that like it is a very private space where I really allow things to come to the surface, but it can also feel like a hiding spot. It can feel like a place where I protect myself from the world, where the work exists before it encounters the viewer. And therefore, the work is kind of only what I want. And I think there's something very powerful when the viewer encounters the work, right? When someone else brings their own opinions to the studio. So the studio is both. It's like this really personal space, but I think that stepping out of it or allowing people to be here and not making it too much of my little safe zone is also important for me.
So having this person come in and kind of bring in their own sort of ideas of what you're creating seems to me like something that's you're opening up your home for critique.
Yes.
And I feel like, I mean, I'm not an artist, but I can imagine it's just so scary.
Yeah. And I mean, when you guys come, and I really don't mean to be like kissing ass, but when you guys come and visit, which you've been a couple times now, it feels so respectful. And they're definitely the people that come here. And I think that they are clueless about how intimate, the works that are in the studio, they are like, they're so fresh. I don't have the distance yet to look at them objectively. And I ever will, but like, especially here, it's very embryonic, like uterus. I don't know the word in English, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Like
embryonic.
Yeah.
Embryonic. Yes.
Yeah.
But I've shared the studio many times, and I think there's also like a beauty when you're working with someone else, hopefully someone that you admire. And there is this, this kind of like learning together, and inevitably like, something that your friend is doing, like suddenly you start mimicking in your own work. And I think that's kind of a compliment. And I miss, when I lived in London, I shared my studio with a lot of friends, and we didn't have any partition walls. It was just one big warehouse. And the dialogue that the paintings had with each other, like we didn't even have to say anything, but we could tell that the paintings were learning from each other.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I don't feel that anyone felt self-conscious, like, oh my God, you're stealing this from me. Like, that was not the attitude. The attitude were like, I admire you so much that like suddenly your color palette just is here. And there was so much support and an attitude of like, we're like of community and sharing and discovering together. And I think that once you become like quote unquote professional artists, that becomes a little bit more complicated because people want to have their individual identities. And so people become a little bit more possessive about compositions, which I think is hilarious.
Trademarked.
It's like, yeah. I've had friends saying like, oh my God, so-and-so is stealing my composition. And I'm like, oh my God, give me a break.
Oh.
But yeah, so I still might sublet my studio to share with someone. And I think it could be a very interesting exercise, to suddenly for a few months, to allow someone to be here in this super intimate space and see what change, this person can bring. I think I'm open to it, and I probably will do that.
That's great. That's great that you're willing to share your space. You have a very spacious and clean space, from what I remember.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's part of the ritual of coming here in the mornings and just cleaning. I think I learned that from a friend in London as well, like Alan. Whenever he was thinking or he needed to make a decision in a painting and he just didn't feel ready, he would get his little broom and sweep around.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes.
Clears your mind. Yeah, that's good.
Right?
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm a clean addict, so I'm
you
always
are?
Cleaning too. Not obviously, I don't have a studio, but
I would love to say that I'm my dad at home, but I'm like, my studio is where all my cleaning energy comes to.
I love that. Matthew, do you have any questions? I'm sorry, I kind of took over.
Oh, no, it's okay.
All my questions.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how you're kind of talking about like just kind of like, when the sun goes down, like that's kind of when the creative energy comes out. I'm just like curious, have you ever made like any like night paintings?
Yeah, so I don't think it was healthy, but at Yale, I think there was this big attitude that the students would go to classes during the day, and then it was like 3 a.m. when the studios would be like popping, every music like loud and people drinking. And, and it was a super intense atmosphere. And to be doing that every day for 2 years, obviously by the time we graduated, everybody was exhausted. Yeah. But there was this kind of reckless attitude of like, it's 4 a.m, we are here, like, let's put some music, let's keep going. And also the nature of having those critiques every other week meant that you had to be making work. And so most of my work during school was done at night, because in the morning and during the days I would be attending classes and writing papers.
Oh.
Yeah. I kind of miss a little bit of like that, but I also remember being extremely unhealthy during those years. So maybe
no sleep,
no like healthy food. I'm trying to maintain a relationship here, trying to trying to be yeah.
So when you were growing up in Rio de Janeiro, did you go to like museums? Were there like kind of Brazilian artists that you knew about, or were you kind of just like making like drawings here and there, kind of?
I was very separate, like from any visual art community. There was a museum, the Modern Art Museum, but it wasn't well funded. It wasn't super, like, we rarely had contemporary art exhibitions. I remember going to see Monet, the water lilies. Like, there were sporadic exhibitions, and my family was not so involved or interested in visual art, but dance, ballet was like one of my mom's biggest passions. So it was culturally rich in the sense that like every week we would see like a play or a ballet.
Wow.
When I was growing up, the municipal theater was directed by this lady who was phenomenal. And she was able to bring like all the Russian ballets, the Cuban ballets. So we had a super rich dance culture, but that was not the same with the visual arts. And I feel that it was only recently with the government, the Lula when he was president, that I think there was a lot of investment in visual art. But unfortunately, now with the current president, we have a lot of censorship. A lot of exhibitions that were coming to the country got censored. And so we don't even have a Ministry of Culture right now in Brazil. I know, it's really scary the way things are happening there. And Rio is in a really bad economical place. Like, it's really sad and bankrupt because it's by far the most beautiful city that I've ever seen. But São Paulo, which is not far from Rio, really became the cultural capital right now. So if you go to São Paulo, it's such an amazing city. There's so many galleries. There's so many young artists. There's a discourse. People are talking about art. People are using art in ways that are so exciting to talk about politics. It's just like so energetic. And in Rio, there obviously there are fantastic artists, but I think that the conversation is just not as dynamic as São Paulo. And so I never felt included in a conversation of visual art in Rio. Like, it was either dance or, now like the galleries that I've been working with and the artists that I'm in touch with, they are all mostly based in São Paulo, which is, yeah, it's strange, actually.
Wow. We haven't been to either cities, but
you must come. You must visit.
No, absolutely. I always hear really beautiful things about both cities. So
yeah, I took a break from New York the beginning of this year. So in November, I went home, and Julia Bland, who's an amazing artist here in New York and dear friend, she came with me, and we traveled through the Amazon for a few weeks.
Oh, wow.
And yes, and it was an amazing experience being home with like an American friend who's also an artist. And it's so funny because being in the Amazon was such a intense experience for both of us. And as soon as we were back in New York, we both just started working in these very large, moody, dark paintings. And we were like, oh my God.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope this doesn't sound like a cliche question, but in your work, you do use you do paint a lot of like plants or like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I can't think of it right now, but like greenery or just like, does that have to do anything in particular to, I don't know,
100%.
but okay,
yeah,
cool.
No. It's a direct, like reference of this environment that I grew up with, which was, it's the tropical rainforest. It's this very lush jungle. And it's so funny. I'm working on this piece, this writing interview with Sarah Rufino, who was the editor of Culture magazine in Brooklyn Rail. And Sarah knows a lot about Brazilian art. She speaks Portuguese. She's a fantastic art writer, but she has this particular interest in Brazilian art. And we were talking a lot about the taboos of describing and depicting the Brazilian landscape, which, so many people, I feel that I tap into a territory where many people feel comfortable accusing me of like exoticizing my context. And I'm like, you should take a trip to Rio. You should grow up in that like landscape of like beach and mountains and forest, and the city is completely integrated with nature in a way that you can't describe. You just have to experience.
I'm sorry. So the people that say that they're not Brazilian, they're not, or are they?
I I think there's both sides.
Both? Okay.
I think there, like historically, I think oil painting per se, which is also a very European tradition, in Brazil was related to colonialism and therefore depicting this super exotic, exuberant landscape. I mean, exotic to the Europeans, that I think that, the turn towards geometric abstraction, the turn towards modernism and this like embrace of modernist imagery that happened in Latin America and specifically Brazil, I don't think that's separated from this desire to not be exoticized. So not be always about the landscape and about the sensuality and sexuality of Brazil and the hot weather and all of these ideas that come, these stereotypical ideas that come with this set of imagery. But I think that my paintings, and I think that when I depict the landscape, I think they are coming from a place of really trying to reconcile this memory of this body growing up in a landscape that was very natural, that was very green, that was surrounded by plants, and in a way that feels integrated with that nature. And in some paintings, the real subject matter really are the plants and not the figure themselves. And in some of the paintings, the figures and the plants are the same. I think when we had our show at Y2K, I had those two paintings. One was a figure and she was directly gazing the viewer, but right across from it, there was this painting that there was this big plant that covered the figure. So the plant the way that we installed, I thought that it was interesting because it's almost like the figure mirrored the painting, the plant. And so there was this kind of direct correlation between the figure being the plant. And
that's so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I try to not. Obviously, I think so much about the meaning of the symbols that I use in my paintings, but I also try to not discourage myself from exploring them. And if someone is accusing me or reading the paintings as being like self-exoticism, I'm like, okay, what it would mean for me to allow that to be part of the conversation, because after all, I am an immigrant. I've been an immigrant for many years now, for over a decade, and I am painting about a country that I no longer live in. So that aspect of being distant, of being separated, and for kind of idealizing a place, right? Like, I think it's home. So there is this imaginary aspect. And I think that my friends who are now in Brazil and who are really struggling with this political reality and economic reality that's devastating, they're like, this feels very separate of the experience of being here. And I think that's totally fair. And I tell them, but I am not there. This is not the experience of a painter in Brazil. Mm-hmm. This is the experience of an immigrant, of someone who dreams about home, but it's not at home. Mm-hmm. And I think, this is all part of the conversation, and I don't want to run away from that conversation. I think it needs to be part of the dialogue,
Wow, that's so beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's very poignant, and I think that is the reality of a lot of people, even people that aren't necessarily artists, just like, not being able to, or for whatever the circumstances are, go home or visit home. But you bring that to your work, and that's It's very beautiful.
I think that sometimes what is not in the conversations when we talk about immigration is that it's really rare that someone, I think it's rare that someone would just suddenly leave their home, leave their family, their friends, the things that they love the most. Just because it's not a vacation, being an immigrant, like we're always chasing after a dream or chasing after or running away from something and trying to find something new. It's not necessarily a peaceful experience. And so to hold on to an idea of home that can be positive and could carry hope and could be a celebration, I think it's important. And I would like to have that in my work for sure.
Yeah, I think it definitely shows, and hearing like the meaning behind it just made it so much more. Or it was already it's strong and beautiful, as I said earlier. But hearing that story, wow,
Oh,
really wow.
Thanks.
So I have one more question, and I hope you don't mind me
Go for it.
asking this. So,
No.
Earlier you had said something about so when you were in Brazil, you're obviously, you are Brazilian, but like no one ever thought of, or no one says things like, oh, she's a Brazilian artist, but I feel like it's always, in America or, when you're in another country, I feel like when someone uses the term like, oh, they're a Brazilian artist, or, oh, they're this artist, or how do you feel about that? Like, how does that?
It's so complicated because like, as I mentioned before, like I studied art. I only studied art after I left Brazil. Mm-hmm. So my whole artistic kind of like education and approach it started in England. Mm-hmm. And England they're funny. They have such a specific history of painting that has to deal with the grotesque. And I was completely in love with British painting. And I lived in England for so many years and surrounded by painters and living a very studio-based life in England. So I know that there's a lot of British painting in the way that I work. But at the same time, I am very, very interested, dedicated, devoted to Brazilian art history, to Latin American art history, but like to specifically in the developments in Brazil, its relationship to politics, its relationship to the dictatorship, to a quest for, a search for a national identity, a national cultural identity. And these are questions that really drive the work. So the work is very mixed. There's like this ideological desire to really advocate for Brazil and be part of the conversation there and be constant. Like I taught Latin American art history at Cornell for a couple months. So it was always like this investment in Brazilian art history is at the forefront of everything that I do. But I love, incorporating the references of painters from around the world. Like I've been in New York for 7 years now. I don't have any other Brazilian painters, friends here. So my friends are like, mostly Americans, but also German, French. And so their works are, they influence me. So obviously there's like traces of the American way of painting that are part of the work now. So when people like talk to me as a Brazilian artist, I feel okay, because I feel like almost like this is it makes sense to me, because it is about a lineage of Brazilian painting, but it is also about painting per se, and the desire to pick up a paintbrush and and the materiality of paint. So as long as it's not just that, is as long as like people can let themselves be involved with the materiality of the painting and the discourse of painting that transcends any nationality, then I'm great. Then I'm happy. It's only when they are just limiting yourself. They're pigeonholing you. They only want to talk about one aspect of the work, and they only want to show your work in relationship to other like Latin American artists. And it's like, wow, that feels limiting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Marcela. I really appreciate it. And it was so lovely hearing more about you and your history and your story. And it was really great.
Thank you, guys. It felt so nice to hear your voice. I can't wait to have you guys in the studio again.
Yeah,
we will have a drink.
Yes, we definitely can't wait either.
Guys, I had such a good time.
I did too.
This was so nice.
No, thank you so much.
Great.
And I'm sure Matthew can attest that I was actually very engaged. The other ones, I was so shy. But again, Marcela, you always like have a really warm presence, and
I feel the same about you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you so
much.
Enjoy
your Saturday, guys.
Oh, likewise.
Thank you.
Chat soon.
Bye.
Okay, bye.